Hey guys, RealMelTan here today. As you can see in front of us, we have the Galax RTX 2060 Super. It's our time to finally review this card, so watch to the end of the video to know how it fares in 1080p gaming and 4040p gaming. Hey guys, welcome back. So as mentioned, we have the RTX 2060 Super in front of us. First things first, of course, we need to thank Galax and Cobel Singapore for lending us this card to test and play with. The RTX 2060 is a souped up version of the RTX 2060. So how you may ask, the RTX 2060 has 6 gigs of VRAM, while this card has 2 additional gigs of VRAM, standing at 8 gigs of VRAM. And of course, second benefit is that it uses the same die as RTX 2070. MSRP of 589 Singapore dollars will roughly translate to 425 US dollars. So this places it in the mid to high end range of graphic cards currently in the market. Theoretically, we're looking at 100 FPS for 1080p gaming and 60 FPS for 1440p gaming. Don't take my word for it. Gordon will be running some tests later to show you that these numbers actually do make sense. Of course, we need to unbox the card, right?
Nah, just kidding. Who the heck wants to watch a video of me slowly taking something out of a box for 2 minutes, right? Not to waste your time, I've taken the card out of the box already, so I'll spare you that thing. Okay, so notable aspects of the Galax RTX 2060 Super. First off, we have two nice 90mm fans right in front of here. On the back, you have a nice back plate right over here, so which gives the card quite a fair bit of rigidity. Power going in is a single 8-pin PCIe coming in. There are a couple of aspects that I like to point out to anybody considering this card. Number one is the I/O itself, which is very different and not very typical from a lot of other RTX cards out there on the market. First, on the top, you have a display port out, followed by an HDMI, and the last is the DVI-D itself. Most other RTX cards on the market will have arrangement something like DisplayPort, HDMI, DisplayPort, DisplayPort. So in essence, Galax has probably decided during the design process to omit 2 of the display ports to give their customers a single DVI-D port over here. While this may be a good thing for people who may still be using older monitors which only have DVI input, so they can use this GPU without any converters or anything for their current existing cabling, this might pose an issue for users who have more than 2 monitors, for example. You'll find that they will quickly run out of ports. The other notable aspect of this card is the fact that it is a 2-slot GPU. So as you can see right over here, it occupies exactly 2 slots. Just nice. There are quite a couple of other 2060 Super out there on the market, including some other models from Galax themselves, that we call them 2.5 slot cards. That means their heatsink protrudes out here. So as to how that can pose a problem for somebody building a new system using a 2060 Super, let me get to that in a bit. Okay, to illustrate my point down here, I have brought in a typical micro ATX motherboard, which is in this case here is the MSI B350M Bazooka. Please do note that this is not the set that we're going to test the GPU later with. This is just merely here to illustrate my point. Okay, say you've just come back from shopping for PC parts and you have just bought yourself a nice spanking micro ATX motherboard for your system, and you've just bought a brand new GPU as well as maybe a Wi-Fi card, because you need Wi-Fi. On the motherboard you have the same 16 slot, ×1. So when I put this graphic card in, when I put this guy in, watch okay, and we have our Wi-Fi card. Ta-da! Not a problem. Everything fits nicely. Your GPU goes in, Wi-Fi card slits nicely in the next slot itself. Now, what happens if you buy a GPU that takes 2.5 slots instead of 2 slots like what this one does? So, let me get everything out here first. Get the GPU out. And for this, I'm going to enlist Mr. Thick Boy here. And I put this guy in here. Oh, cock. Yes, oh, cock indeed. Yeah, so now I have discovered that I have just screwed up because Thick Boy here has just occupied my only remaining PCI 1 slot, which means I can't put my Wi-Fi card in, which means I'm screwed.
Now we come to the most fun part, all you guys are waiting for, the numbers game. Because right now we have the RTX 2060 Super. As you guys may know, you have seen the title, who we're going to pit against. Gordon, who we're going to pit it against?
We're going to pit it against this guy over here. This is the 5700 Mac from MSI. Now, the main reason why this guy has been chosen to pit against this guy is in the Singapore context, both of these sit at more or less the same price range. That's 589 SGD This is 559 SGD. So this guy is about $36 less. Putting this in the scenario that you got $600 to spend on a graphic card. If you pick either one of these two fellas, which one of these two is gonna come out on top? So we're gonna get right to that. Okay, this is where we talk about the test setup itself. Right now I have the Galax 2060 Super sitting right inside the demo set here, and 5700 from MSI is right over here. So we've already done the numbers for this guy. So now we're gonna run the same benchmarks for the RTX 2060 over here to see how they stack up. To take you through what's inside here, I've taken the glass off this case, but this is the Fantech P350X. Following which, CPU underneath here is a Ryzen 5 3600. And you have 16 gigs of G-Skill Sniper X 3200 MHz RAM. All of it is sitting on MSI B450 Tomahawk Max, the revised version of the Tomahawk with a bigger RAM chip to better accommodate the Ryzen 3rd Gen CPUs. Yes, and that's an ADATA SX200 SSD sitting right down there. OS is, of course, is Captain Obvious, it's Windows 10. And without further ado, let's get to the numbers. Okay, the first game that we are going to benchmark today would be Far Cry 5. For Far Cry 5, as well as the other games, we're going to do two runs. One in 1080p, the other run in 1440p. First run here would be 1080p. As you can see right over here, everything set to default Ultra preset. The usual, the VSync is off, 1080p. Hit F5 and get this show on the road. Okay, and here are the results. You've got a minimum of 85, average of 104, maximum of 130, and I've taken a screenshot of the result screen from the 5700. Average is the same. The minimum on the 5700 is less, but the maximum on the 5700 is more. In this game, in a sense, both GPUs are pretty much on par with each other, with the 2060 having a little bit of a slight edge if you follow by the frames rendered. Yeah, it has a bit of a slight edge. It has rendered more frames in that fixed span of time. This is for 1440p. Okay, so we have repeated the same benchmark for Far Cry 5, but this time in 1440p Ultra. So if you were to look at the numbers right over here, your average FPS on the 570 is 87, the 2060 is 83. The 2060 loses by about 5 frames in average. Despite this, however, I'll probably put the two of them as, yeah, more or less on the same page itself. But for the moment right now, 5700 here has the slight edge. So that's how the 2060 Super fares in Far Cry 5. So next we are going to move on to the next game itself, which is another title by Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Hey guys, we are back again. Last time we left you with two other benchmarks and we went to some snags, some issues with the Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So we are back here again to show you the final numbers for this Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Gordon, let's take it away.
This is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Quite a fairly recent game, very multi-threaded, also quite demanding GPU wise, as you're going to find out in due course. These are the settings that I'm going to be using. The first run will be with 1080p, VSync off. The graphics I have set to the second highest, which is very high. I'm not using Ultra because, quite frankly speaking, on anything low, let's say a 2080, Ultra is definitely going to hit the FPS. And the visual differences between the very high and Ultra isn't really particularly very much. With that being said, let's get this show on the road. So, right, run benchmarks.
Gordon, what kind of numbers are you expecting?
Let's see, probably 70 plus. This is quite a demanding game, even at 1080p. You can see we kick off at about, yeah. But interior shots are usually, the FPS will be higher in these like interior shots like that. But you'll notice in this building benchmark, once the camera pans out and starts to swing around the town, yeah, you start to see the frames stuff. On a side note, while we're running this through this thing, I'd like to point out a couple of things. You see, even at 1080p, very high. First of all, your RAM usage is... I've got nothing open in the background, no Chrome, no nothing. I've only just got this game. I've already have 7 gigs of my system RAM occupied. The other point to note out is this one. You have 4.6 gigs of VRAM being used up at 1080p, very high. For those who may have budget line for the lower end GPUs, like let's say 1050 Ti 4 gig, RX 574 gig. For this game, you might want to turn it down to medium. Right, we have the numbers here. So your average FPS is 78 at 1080p, very high. And this is the result from the Radeon 5700. So the win for 1080p goes to the 2060 Super, not by much, 70 frames, with the 2060 doing 80, almost 80 versus this guy 70. Yeah, so that's the difference you are looking at here. Right, we're gonna do one more run. This one will be at 1440p. At 1440p, this will be a resolution where the GPU becomes even more of a bottleneck. But then again, it's the 2060 Super. I wouldn't really want to guess what's gonna come out. So, okay, so I come out. Let me run the benchmark. This is the run at 1440p. Averaging about 60, 70. Once he pans out, he drops below 60. So never mind, we'll let it run through and let's see how final result turns out like. Yeah, you also kind of notice over here, the VRAM being used up is highest. I will above 5 gig. Just now it was about 4.4, 4.5 gig. If I were to, I'll probably have set this game at Ultra instead of very high, that the amount of VRAM used will consequently be a lot higher. Let's run this through. The 2060 Super clocks in at 61 and the 5700 clocks in at 61. So the one thing I would like to highlight here, this is about the 5700 itself. The Assassin's Creed series ever since Unity Origin it's always leaned favorably towards NVIDIA GPUs. For the Navi card over the 5700, there is still a gap between its contemporary, but the gap is not as big compared to, let's say, in previous generations like Vega and Polaris. We come to the final game that we're gonna benchmark. This is Forza Horizon 4. To continue on from my comments on AC Odyssey, certain games as they come out, they favor one brand of GPU to another brand of GPU. Like when I said just now, when AC Odyssey tends to lean a bit more towards the green cam, this one is the other way around. Forza Horizon 4's engine tends to favor the Radeon family from AMD. Let's say a 1066 gig versus an RX 580 8 gig. Usually in most other games they will be on par, but in this particular game the RX 580 will have like 20%, 25% performance advantage over the equivalent NVIDIA card. Okay, I've set it to 1080p, Ultra preset, and let's go.
No music can be shown because of censorship.
Yes, unfortunately this game tends to catch streamers and YouTubers unaware, or they trip them up quite badly because it uses quite a fair bit of copyrighted music, especially for the benchmark. If you're happy, you record a benchmark, you upload it, and the next thing you know, you probably potentially could get a copyright strike.
Copyright claim, not strike.
Copyright claim, okay,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, it's not a strike, it's a claim.
It's a claim, yes.
But still annoying. Something you want to avoid if you can. The one thing annoying about this game does not like MSI Afterburner very much. That's why you don't see my little graph down here with all the CPU usage and all that. So the only way I have to see what the FPS there is this small little counter down here. Which right now it's doing about 120, 130 on average. Let's see what the final results are. Results are in. It's 127 FPS on average. Yeah, there we go. Like I said, there's still a gap. The 2060 Super still falls behind the 5700. The gap is like 5 FPS out of 120, 130. It's not really something you're really going to notice. But that's at 1080p, where the CPU also can play a factor in this as well. Let's do the second run, this time at 1440p. 1440p will make the GPU more of the limiting factor. So change the resolution, the benchmark is going to restart. Let's see what happens. Right, it's losing an average of like 20 FPS by raising the resolution from 1080p to 1440p. So right now it's hovering about 80, 90, somewhere thereabouts. Your average is 104. Compared to the 570, 570 is 107. The NVIDIA 2060 Super, 104. There's still a gap. As of right now, with the current latest drivers from both sides, it's not a gap that you are really gonna notice. That's how the three games go. To sum the whole thing up, Far Cry 5 is more or less on par. Both the 2060 Super as well as the 570 are on par with each other. Assassin's Creed, the NVIDIA card has the edge, though not by much, especially when you compare to benchmark results using the previous gen Turing and Pascal cards versus their counterparts from Radeon. And we have Forza Horizon 4. Glad to see that the Nvidia guys have been very hard at work. They have managed to almost close the gap, and we look forward to see how these three games run like. We'll give them a couple of months, see what surprise both sides can pull.
So I'm back here again. I just concluded 3 gaming benchmarks for the 3700 versus the 2060 Super. Gordon, what do you think of the cuts so far?
Well, the results have been quite surprising, especially to me. I've done my own tests. I mean, not these two exact cards, from 2060 Supers and 5700s in general. If I were to compare my data from a month ago to today, I would say quite a bit of striking differences actually. Two games that I use, Assassin's Creed and the Forza Horizon 4. Both GPU, the drivers have managed to close in and narrow the disadvantage that they had in their title before. Kind of shows that both sides have been pretty hard at work, getting these two guys to be as fast as they can. Who benefits the most? People who buy these cards. That being said, if I were to pick between these two, I would say, even though that guy's $30 more, I'll pick him.
There's a reason?
Reason. Okay, mainly there are things that you can see in benchmarks and there are things that benchmarks don't show you. One of which is that, on the whole, so far, I'll say when it comes to software and driver support, Nvidia still has the edge. I mean, if you look at the Nvidia drivers, if you want to go online, if you want to go on stream your gameplay to Facebook, it's click on the GeForce XP. It's very easy. You just click a couple of times somewhere here, and you're done. You're streaming all your gameplay to Facebook or whatever suits your fancy. It's all very intuitive. The Radeon Adrenaline drivers, so far I see they've been hard at work trying to get those features to run it, all those various features to make this guy, but there's still quite a fair bit of improvement. If you are looking just to play games, I would just say for the moment, you can't go wrong with either one of these. Driver-wise, they are pretty okay. We didn't really encounter any bad crashes or anything like that from either one of them. If, however, you're looking for something a little bit extra, like you want to be able to stream, you want to be able to what you just did in the game, that kind of thing, this would be the choice to go for.
You want to give a score, what can you give out of 10? Or either of each?
Oh, that's going to be hard.
Okay, never mind, just stick with one card, the card that you went for.
I mean, comparison-wise, I wouldn't really put a score on this. What do you score against among a whole bunch of 2060 Supers? Or do you compare against the rest of the RTX range? I would say more valuable to put a question will be, how does this stack against the rest of the RTX range? And my answer would be this. If you have a 1080p 144Hz monitor, you're looking to output about 100 FPS on average, the 2060 Super is a good GPU to go for. At the price range that it goes for, it should last quite a fair while. I mean, for today's games, it does about on average about 100 at high or ultra. Fast forward another 3 years, it will become a 1080p 60 FPS card, so it should last you a pretty long while if you play it just at 1080p. At 1440p, however, is where the picture changes. I would say at 1440p, if you were to buy a GPU now, the absolute minimum you should be aiming for is a 2070 Super. So if you got the molar, get a 2080 Ti.
Yeah, that may be non-content for that video. We'll see how it goes from there. Let us know what you think in the comment sections below. If you want to see more such tests, let us know in the comments. Like, you want to see within which card, which CPU, or would like to see more tests against the RTX 2060 Super or the 5700 or even the 5700 XT. We prepare all these videos. Thank you, Gordon, again. Hello Systems, it's been a long day. Subscribe to my channel again. Remember to click on the bell button. So Gordon and I say goodbye.